Welcome, everyone. Thank you very, very much for being here. It's a great pleasure to have you all here with us, and an honor to be here with you. I have the particular and distinct honor of hosting my good friend, Pranada Kamtwa, the award-winning author of Bhakti Shakti. Her second book, her first, Wise Love, was exceptionally well received, and for very good reasons. Pranada's writing sheds light on the Bhakti wisdom tradition with a focus on identifying the true nature of the self, who is a lover, and the culture of spiritual life, specifically the culture of Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotional relationships. Pranada, welcome, and thank you very much for being here with me today.
I'm so happy to be here and meet everyone and have this opportunity to speak with you.
So I know you from way back, which is so nice for me. And not everyone else here has had the pleasure of knowing you for as long as I have. So I'd like to begin by asking you to share a little bit about your personal history in your spiritual life and how your personal spiritual journey brought you to being an author.
Oh, well, I, from a very young age, was a searcher. I was born in San Francisco and raised in Marin County, and that was the hotbed of counterculture at the time when I was really small. And I don't know where I picked up on this, but around when I was 8 years old, I had never heard this term before, but I had this intense yearning to find the absolute truth. And I was in Catholic school, so I have no idea where I got that term. I didn't hear it at home, and I didn't hear it on the TV, but that was my desire. And after a long search in my mind, 8 years, I came across the books of my spiritual teacher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. And I had but this was after like doing a lot of searching in the San Francisco Bay Area, which had basically everything. You know, it was like a smorgasbord. You had access to anything. And I had a transformative experience reading two little books. One was Beyond Birth and Death, and the other was Easy Journey to Other Planets. Small little books, but very powerful, and it changed my life in that moment. And I decided in a short period of time after that to join an ashram and take up the bhakti in a very serious way, in a very focused. So I was 16 years old, and my journey led me into many different services and around the world. But I came to writing in a kind of very circuitous route. I didn't know that I was a writer. I never thought of myself as a writer. And in fact, I was looking for writers for this publishing house that I was working for, to be able to convey some of the essence of bhakti that was not making its way into trade publications. And after some time, and I'm not finding the authors I had hoped to find, I got a little voice inside said, "You write." And I was like, "Oh yeah, right, I'll write. I don't know how to write." And this was in 2007. But I ignored the voice for as long as possible. It didn't go away. So I started doing things like taking writing seminars and attending local writers' workshops, and gradually began writing, showing my work, becoming acquainted with the art of writing, so to speak, and learning really how to write your heart, which is something that's very difficult, and it remains difficult. But anyway, that's how I became involved in bhakti and then in writing.
You know, one of the questions that I get when I give classes and workshops and such, a question I frequently get is, how can you tell the difference between the voice of your mind and the voice of your ego and the voice of God within your heart giving you direction? So I think it's given us a very good example of how to make that distinction. If someone within you is telling you that you should write books about bhakti yoga, that's God in the heart.
Especially when you're not, I didn't have any idea of being an author, or, in fact, somebody wrote me today and said, I really feel like I want to write, I must write, but I also, in a very honest, self-reflective way, he wrote, but I also want fame. So if that's your idea, first of all, it's not going to happen. And second of all, it's going to sabotage the writing. But so it is not completely easy to distinguish between the mind and the voice, the true inner voice. But we can have some sense of it when we're getting good guidance, or we're being told to do something we don't want to do.
Yeah, that's another way. If you're being told to do something that's a great service, but not necessarily something you want to do, good chance that that's the divine voice and not just
it's a good
your
chance.
ego.
And the other way is that get confirmation. Like I got a lot of confirmation writing. It's been an astounding journey. I feel like I'm a witness to what's happening with the books coming out, because I'm coming to you know how it is, you come to a blank page or a blank screen, and it's very intimidating. And you write something and it's just awful, and you don't know where to go with it, and you leave where you are and listen to a lecture or read a sacred text, and oh my God, exactly what you needed or were looking for, the answer, it was right there. And I am just overwhelmed. That happens almost every day. It's gotten to the point where it's like, okay, I can not only expect this, but this is really quite far out. So that's another confirmation that I had a voice that was a higher, my friend, my divine friend, saying, I want you to do this, even though it was very outside my comfort zone.
Well, we're all very grateful that that was the case. Speaking of questions, for all of you who are here with us, if you have any questions during the course of our conversation, please feel free to raise your hand. There's a button on the bottom of your screen called labeled reactions, and there's a raise hand option if you click on that. So if at any point you have any questions, please just go ahead and raise your hand. We'll see you. You can also post your questions in the chat and we'll see them there. So divine inspiration for becoming a writer, please tell us why you wrote Bhakti Shakti in particular. And by the way, just so everybody sees, here's what the beautiful cover Bhakti Shakti looks like. This is a really well-designed book, as well as being just a wonderful book from the standpoint of the writing. It's just very beautiful and very easy to read and very attractive. So please tell us why this book in particular.
It's actually what I wanted to write before I wrote anything, but I couldn't write it. I was writing a blog when I first started responding to the divine guidance. And I was listening to the global conversation and trying to understand how to bring bhakti into the dialogue. And one of the things that I kept hearing about was the sacred feminine, the divine feminine, and I very much sympathized with that conversation, which I felt was in response to mistreatment, abuse of women, and denigration, disrespect of women, and thereby subsequently children. So I felt that was an important conversation, but it was a disjointed one, or I found that they were missing major pieces in the in where they could possibly go with their ideas of elevating the feminine and taking advantage of feminine qualities and nature, which they were seeing as positive alternatives to how the world has been going under patriarchy and male domination, if you want to call it that. So I really felt in that blog, I was starting to talk about the feminine divine and making a distinction between the feminine divine and divine feminine, which is in brief, the feminine divine is the feminine feature of the divine, and divine feminine is feminine, material feminine or female, with a concept of divinity, which I found the conversation was referring mostly to healthy psychology, the cooperative nature or the networking nature of the feminine to connect on the social level and improve social situations for all people and the earth as well, take care of the earth. So I found they weren't making that distinction, but I also found that because people weren't aware of Sri Radha and what she offered to us as individuals and society and that dialogue, I always wanted to bring her to the fore, because she's quite hidden even within people in the Bhakti community. They're very cautious about talking about Sri Radha because she's so exalted and so difficult to understand that in one way that we often guard her. And I think we guard her a little too cautiously. That's why I've written a book, is to bring attention to her and bring the benefits of knowing her to individuals. That's why I wrote Bhakti Shakti.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. So you mentioned Radha, but there are actually two aspects of the feminine divine spoken about in your book.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
Elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. There are two primary goddesses in the yoga traditions. We have Radha as the Adi Shakti of the spiritual energy or original energy. And then we have Durga Devi, Durga Ma, who is also called Adi Shakti, but that particular reference to being primal energy refers to the material world. So we have two goddesses. One oversees the souls in the material world, and one oversees the souls in the spiritual world. So we often don't hear about Sri Radha because we are here in this world and quite consumed with dealing with this world and trying to get out. But Radha herself is the one. Well, I explain in Bhakti Shakti how Radha and Durga work together to encourage us to take a spiritual path and to make that journey, take that step, which is oftentimes not the first one we want to take. So yeah, I mean, it's described in detail about the two goddesses, about the two energies. I think it's really important to understand that there are three energies. There's the energy of the soul. We are in that Shakti. And then we have two opportunities. We can come under the shelter of the material energy, or we can come under the shelter of the spiritual energy. That's what we have as an opportunity. And if we don't know about Sri Radha, we don't understand the full opportunities we have to take shelter of the spiritual energy.
One of the things I really loved about your book was how you've taken these rather esoteric topics Radha, who is hidden, as you said, and Durga Devi, whose role in our lives is not always fully understood. And by making a distinction between the two, you make it so clear. It's not couched in the kind of vague or flowery or new agey language that we so often hear used, especially when speaking about feminine aspects of spirituality. So there's a logic behind the division of the respective realms of Durga Devi and Radharani. And I was wondering if you could just, the way you did it in the book was so nice. The way you explained the function, their functions relative to the functions of their two realms. So can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Like, you're asking what their functions are?
Yeah, like, the particular phrases you used that I liked so much were the realm of justice for the
right,
world and the realm of mercy for the spiritual world, and how Durga and Radha respectively are the dispensers of each.
Yes, thank you for that triggering reminder of there are two energies in this world. There's the energy of justice or karma, and the energy of mercy. And when we understand that certain this, first of all, it breaks down that simply, then we can kind of like focus where we want to put our energy, where we want to put our focus. And the energy of justice, we know very well. It's the karmic reactions that we experience in our sojourn in this world, where every action has a reaction. It's very tit for tat. It may not happen right away. It could happen in a subsequent lifetime, but we are in a very tight bind in the material energy, which is all about justice. It's giving you facility to make your choices. We have free will. You make your choices, and then there are reactions to those choices, good and bad. And if that's our only prospect, we have a lot of problems. We have a big problem if it's only justice. So it's not only justice. There's the energy of mercy, and the energy of mercy is bhakti. Bhakti comes is personified as Sri Radha, known as Bhakti Devi. She is the goddess of bhakti, and she dispenses that mercy. She's extremely compassionate. Whereas Durga, in her compassion, she'll take that three-pronged trident and poke us, right, with the modes of material nature. Wake up, wake up. This is not your place. You have some other facility and options here to just this realm of justice. And so she's poking us toward Bhakti Devi, Sri Radha, and that mercy. And when we finally realize, oh, I'm suffering, I'm in pain, to see what my options are, then we can turn our attention and receive mercy, divine dispensation.
I've seen it happen that sometimes, given a hypothetical choice between justice and mercy, people thinking that they have a moral obligation to face up to whatever the results of their actions are, choose justice. And I just want to encourage everyone here that you don't have to do that. That it's okay to choose mercy. Now, here's another really important point that you made in the book, that Maya Shakti, or the realm of justice, the energy that supports this realm of justice, doesn't have any reason to exist without us. And that we, the individual soul, the jiva, are we are all eternally features of reality. And we would have to be features of reality in order for Maya Shakti to have any reason to be. So can you say a little bit more about this? Like, you know, how we as individual souls manage to find ourselves here in this land of justice in the first place?
Well, that's a really big theological, philosophical question. I don't think I'm going to take that one on fully, but I will make some comments. Bhaktivedanta describes that we're here by choice. One of the intrinsic characteristics of consciousness is free will. Now, we're finite units of consciousness, but even though we're finite, doesn't negate that we have all of the features that are inherent in consciousness, which is free will, existence, we're cognizant, we have feelings, we love, as we've talked about before in the books. So those intrinsic characteristics, they're eternal. And that because what is consciousness? Consciousness is eternal. So inherent intrinsic traits will be also internal. So we have choice and we make choice. How we made that choice, that's not what I'm going to talk about. It's a big, we had in our lineage, we have great minds talking about this and debating about this for some time. Actually, it's not such a debate, but it is more modern debate. But how we make that, whatever the choice is, here we are, and we've come under the jurisdiction of the justice. And I know many people like you who say, well, we have to go with the justice, except for if it comes to ourselves. Then we'll go, can you give me a little mercy? So if you have that, if there is a request for mercy, it has to be unfettered. It has to be available for everyone equally. That's what the nature of mercy is. And there's certainly nothing that we haven't done in one of our lifetimes that somebody in a situation that we see today, which is we would deem very awful and horrible behavior, that we haven't done ourselves. So this is just the feature of reality, is that there's justice there to teach and there's mercy there to benedict us. And we should choose mercy, and we should choose mercy for everyone. And that's why I'm writing, is to spread the idea that let's choose mercy. And it means changing ourselves. It's not just like, well, I'm going to just continue my inappropriate behavior and choices and ask for mercy. It doesn't work like that. We come under the shelter of Sri Radha and the goddess of mercy, and she dispenses that mercy in response to our approach to her, which needs to be loving. And when we find it, we can't just compartmentalize. I'm going to say that I'm going to love the Supreme Being and my family and some good friends. And then I'm going to really be able to develop love. No, love is not discerning like that. Love is unconditional, and it has to become a universal love. I mean, that's like the first step of divine love, is a universal love, where we can really become grounded in the understanding that I am a spiritual being. You are a spiritual being. We are completely equal, and I will see with that vision and I will act with that vision. So if we want to have access to that mercy and the stages of love leading to pure divine love, then we're going to have to start right where we are, giving mercy and sharing love beyond our little world.
Thank you. That was so nice. We have, and that actually addressed, or at least started to get into a follow-up question I had about this, about how the practice of bhakti frees us from the influence of Maya Shakti, and you've already touched on that. There are also some nice comments in the chat, so I want to look at those, one of which is a question about the practice of bhakti in relationship to, how it practically frees us and allows us to develop this mood of wanting mercy, not just for ourselves, but from others. Mark had a nice example from American history. Abraham Lincoln said that I have always found that mercy bears richer fruits than strict justice. And I think, we can find examples, even in this world, that give us a good indication of the veracity of spiritual teachings. Because, yeah, I think that's probably true. And I think even in just our own personal relationships, we can think, yes, mercy for me, but justice for everybody else. And, that's not necessarily the best basis upon which to build a relationship. Sydney is letting us know that I'm in a study group that just finished Wise Love today, which Wise Love, by the way, is Pranada's first book, which is also very excellent and which I highly recommend. We will start a study on Bhakti Shakti on 13th of March through the RISE platform, through the Bhakti Center. So RISE is a community platform that the Bhakti Center is using for developing a spiritual community. So people who are interested in checking that out, if you do a search on RISE Bhakti Center NYC, I'm sure that'll come up. So Sydney, thank you very much for sharing an invitation for people to participate in that. Laurel has your beautiful book and asks, is chanting a free flow flowering of silence or out loud whisper, etc.? How do you love as mantra practice? So this is a little question about just the practice of mantra meditation in the development and its role in the development of our heart, our devotional feeling. So you want to just give us a little of your take on the practice?
Mantra meditation is a core practice in bhakti for a number of reasons. One is, and we see this in Radha's own example, which demonstrates that if we have a personal relationship with someone, we like to speak about them. We like to hear about them. We like to call their name. And when we call their name, we call them to us. We would like to be in their company. So the mantra meditation is a call to our divine friend to be present and to help us and to engage us in service. And Radha demonstrates this herself. One of the interesting aspects of bhakti is that the practice is perfection. And that's not all the case with the yoga systems. And by that, I mean, like in the other yogas, you do one thing, and then in transcendence, you do something else. It's leading you somewhere, and then you get rid of those practices. But in bhakti, that's not the case. We're engaged in practices that are actually transcendental activities that exist in the spiritual realm when we attain a liberated state. So we hear about the residents of the spiritual realm engaged in kirtan, for instance, and Radha herself is calling out her beloved's name. So in taking the mantra of the names, the Maha Mantra, the Hari-Krishna Maha Mantra in the Bhakti tradition, we're actually following in Radha's footsteps and being trained in a relationship with the person who is named in the mantra. So, and what happens is, because the person in the mantra and the mantra are non-different from each other, then we're in direct conversation with our Supreme Beloved. And what happens? We are spiritualizing our consciousness and our psychic body, our physical body, and in touch with spirit, we're actually being influenced by the love of the Supreme Person.
Mm.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Well, you know, you were speaking earlier about how Radha is secret, hidden, but she's hiding in plain sight as the first name of the Hare Krishna mantra. You know, that's her name in evocative form. So we begin by calling to Radha and end by calling to Radha in when we engage in this conversation. From the practice standpoint, you know, part of the question was, you know, chanting silently, chanting out loud. Is it like a loud chant? Is it a whisper chant? What kind of chant is it?
Well, I think it's, you know, the texts describe it in different ways. It can be in your mind, which is a more difficult form of meditation, I have found. It can be spoken just under your breath. And that also depends on how well you can focus the mind and hear. Sometimes people say it more, you know, more out loud. And that, you know, I've heard of these great lovers of God in great love calling out very loudly. So I think it's a personal preference. I find that I chanted a little softer, and I can, as long as I can hear well, that's sufficient. But it's actually different kinds. It's also described as different kinds of meditation, that you can go from loud to softer to mental, and the meditation becomes, as you advance in the practice, the meditation becomes thicker toward what we know as dharana and samadhi, these deeper states of meditation. So yeah, I think it's personal. But I think the point is to hear the sacred sound vibration. The sacred sound vibration is has potency because it is purely spiritual. And we have a hard time relating to this because we don't know of anything else that is purely spiritual, right? We don't have experience oftentimes with that which is spiritual, the power it has, and what can happen when we're in direct contact with it. But the name is Bhakti Devi herself, the name, the service that we render in Bhakti, these are all pure spiritual energy that has great power to remove the subtle conditioning and the gross conditionings from our psychic body, and help us progress toward the love that we desire.
You know, this may seem like a counterintuitive thing for you to say, that we don't experience anything else really that's spiritual. I think that in part this is because a lot of what we experience is either metaphysical or, for those familiar with the theory of the three qualities of material nature, there are these three qualities that can be described as goodness, passion, and ignorance. And when we see something in the mode of goodness, we think that's spiritual, which is altogether different from the idea of ghosts, because sometimes spiritualism is understood to be like having a seance or connecting, you know, somehow with the spirit of a departed soul, meaning connecting with them on a metaphysical level. So I'm really glad you brought this up, this idea that the sound vibration of a mantra that is made of names of the different aspects of the absolute truth is something that's actually on a spiritual level. And therefore, when we come in contact with it, we're coming in contact with something genuinely spiritual and transcendental.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, because it's what I was getting at was what you were saying, is that what we experience as subtle, we've often called spiritual, but it's squarely within the material realm. Like the mind is very subtle. The mind is not spiritual. The mind is material. It's a material energy. It's a psychic material energy that needs to be spiritualized. And when we have, for instance, these ideas of channeling or other subtle aspects that are valid experiences, it doesn't make them spiritual just because they're subtle. And that's an important distinction to learn, and then start being able to clarify our own vision on it, so that we're not bewildered about what is spiritual, because so much of what goes as spiritual is just something, some subtle material energy that's not going to do us spiritual good. Like you gave the example of the three energies of the material world. So one of those energies is illumination, and it's brings knowledge, and people can become very conditioned to that, thinking that it's spiritual to gain knowledge and to be peaceful and in goodness and be a kind person. But kindness and virtue in themselves, they're good qualities for a spiritual practice, but they're not spiritual unto themselves, not unless they're used in a spiritual way.
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction to make, that the platform from which we can launch ourselves into spiritual consciousness is not necessarily spiritual consciousness itself. Good deeds are good, better than bad deeds, to be sure. But material goodness is not quite the same thing as spiritual transcendence.
Yeah, because what are good deeds? What happens is that they're part of the karmic fabric. So I do good deeds, I get good reactions, but that has kept me in the cycle. I'm not getting free from the cycle. I'm just getting good reactions, but I'm in the cycle, and the bad's going to come. The bad response will also be there. So it's not that we want good karmic reactions. We want no karmic reactions anymore. And that requires intervention from an energy that is outside of the material world, that is outside the three gunas, that is outside the laws of justice and the laws of karma, time, space. And what is that? There's only one energy, there's only one spiritual energy. That is bhakti. And the dispenser of that bhakti is Sri Radha, the goddess of mercy. So that's, when you're talking in these subtle things, and that's can get very confusing when talking about Durga Ma also, is because she is the master of those three modes. That's what her trident is goodness, passion, ignorance. That is these modes that are impressing us with different sufferings to wake us up to our situation and say, here, spirit soul, go in this direction. Yeah, but that all three parts of her trident are material.
So I want to remind everyone, first of all, before I forget, that you can ask questions by raising your hand at any time. And John, thank you for being right there on cue. I'm going to get to you in just a second. And you can also post questions in the chat where Deborah has just asked us to restate the 3 material energies. So if you would be kind enough to just restate how they are known and what their attributes are, that would be great.
Yeah, so in Sanskrit, they're sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva is illumination, it's goodness, it's the energy of, it's uplifting, it will bring peace. 2 is the rajas, which is passionate activity, and tamas is like inertia and not clear thinking, not understanding even right from wrong necessarily. All of these are necessary. Like if we want to gain knowledge, we need sattva. When we want to get something done, we need rajas. When we need to go to sleep, we need tamas. So they have functions to perform that are important in our lives. And we want to, as you said, come to a position where we can reach for transcendence. And that's best done from sattva, from goodness. So we want to make our food, our employment, the nature of the tone of our relationships. We want to bring those to goodness, to and I'm in fact writing about these qualities right now in the next book, describing what they are and how to recognize them. Like for instance, if we think of music, if something inspires us, we could call that music in sattva. If something gets us dancing and passionate, we call that music in rajas. And if something like depresses us, we could call that music in tamas. So these three gunas or threads are present in everything: our psychology, our physical body. That's what the Ayurveda is based on even neighborhoods. Like I live in the country, and it's a very peaceful setting, and it allows me to think higher things. And when I go into New York, I feel like frenetic energy. And so there's these modes are everywhere. And to free ourselves, Krishna says in the Gita, is actually impossible without his divine mercy. And he has, which is very interesting thought, that Radha is the embodiment of that divine energy, which is pure, unconditional spiritual love. And she dispenses that mercy in the world through those who represent her, those who carry her message. So when we come in contact with someone who's carrying the message of bhakti, we can understand that we are receiving some mercy from Srimati Radharani herself.
I want to talk more about this idea of divine intervention, the request for divine intervention as a part of a spiritual practice, which I think for many folks might be a little unusual to think of that. But first, I want to get to John and his question. So John, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Actually, my question might segue well back into your question, Hari. So, Randa, like you, I was raised Catholic, and for me, deep connection to the Virgin Mary, which has continued. You know, sometimes I still go to Mass for the Eucharist, and I read like John of the Cross, Juan de la Cruz, Francis of Assisi, Teresa Avila. They're very important to me. I'm trying to imagine how the Virgin Mary would fit into this construct of the book, but maybe I'm trying to compare, Japanese food with Italian food. Maybe sushi doesn't go with marinara sauce.
No, you're not actually. When I was writing Bhakti Shakti, at one point I was thinking that I would be discussing about the goddesses in all the traditions, Celtic, German, Roman, indigenous goddesses, of which there are thousands actually. And I felt it would be important to at least touch on them and acknowledge them. Certainly Mother Mary, who has given us a son that has been a very powerful preacher in this world and has changed the lives of millions of people. So I decided that instead of doing that, which would really take quite a bit, it was beyond the scope of the book in a certain way. And so instead I decided to write about how to approach the goddess, whoever the goddess is that you're worshiping, how to approach her, what's the moods, how to not be misled by these ideas of myth and use them as archetypes to just like gain something from them, like, oh, this is a good quality that they have and I'm going to go after that quality, so I'll think of them that way. I mean, that's not a bad thing, but anyway, I wanted to set out how to approach any goddess. And then what I felt was most important was to deal with the two primary goddesses of the yoga tradition, because according to the Bhakti tradition, these are the fountainhead of all the goddesses. We have the spiritual goddess and we have the material goddess. And then underneath them, there are thousands of goddesses. So we're not, by speaking about them, denying the position of any of the goddesses. And I think, to have a relationship as you do with Mother Mary and these saints is important and inspiring and uplifting. I have, as a Bhakti follower, read in many traditions that I can gain so much, because wherever you find a thread of Bhakti, why not pick it up and embrace it? And I just have found myself that there's within the Bhakti Vedanta tradition, there is such a wealth of information about transcendence that I haven't seen in any of these other traditions, that I am compelled to stay in this orbit. But it doesn't mean that there's not value elsewhere. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up. Somebody else actually just wrote me from Ireland and said that she lives very close to a place where Mother Mary had appeared in 1849, something like that. And she's a practicing Bhakta, but she has really a heart connection with Mother Mary. And I just, what's wrong with that? I mean, even these other goddesses and the other traditions. One of the things that's very interesting, I'll say this briefly. There's one Bhakti saint scholar in our tradition named Thakur Bhaktivinoda, and he was in the beginning of the 19th century. He was a magistrate within the British government, and he raised something like 12 or 14 children. He wrote over 100 books on Bhakti and had this extraordinary life of practice in addition to these family and social responsibilities. And he had some very interesting insight that the worship of Durga is almost like, it's like at the beginning of a spiritual practice where one is seeing the divine in the earth and in the cosmos. And these goddesses from the Celtic and Roman and Greek traditions and indigenous traditions, they're very much like turning that way to honor the divine in the world in front of us, right? And then within the yoga traditions, the next worship is the worship of the sun. And we see this in indigenous cultures too, that it's almost like he's describing it as like a progression of consciousness. So you go to the sun and you see these other energies besides the earth, right? That are the planets and these in the heavens. So we're worshiping what the sun will give us and what it brings to us. peaceful, a healthy mental health when we have sun. It is proper, it grows food, it enlivens our being, and it provides life, it provides the form of life that we need, the sun. Anyway, he showed this progression and gradually how it progresses from sun to Ganesh, which is an awareness of consciousness in life around us, the human form, the animal form, then to worship Shiva, which is more focusing on the human consciousness, and then Krishna, which is now we're coming to transcendental awareness. So Thakur Bhaktivinoda described it like that, and I really appreciated how, and all of those stages are important, right? Why would we're not, we can't jump over these things. We need to progress in a practice. And so we may go through, and anyway, it's a beautiful way of being, right? Is to appreciate the gifts that we get from the sun, from the earth, from other people, from a growing awareness of our potential as human beings, until we reach a point where we can actually be in direct dialogue with the Supreme Person. And in Bhakti, we do that through mantra meditation, especially.
Thank you. And in the Catholic tradition, the Virgin Mary's chief role is divine intervention, person you go to intervene. So I think that segues back to Hari.
John, thank you so much for your question, which segues over to another question that we have in the chat. Malati, nice to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Malati is asking, Pranada, by the way, this is Philadelphia Malati, I believe. We have so many Malatis.
Yeah.
When we pray while chanting or otherwise for divine intervention, for service, for our hard hearts to crack open with divine love, and I'll have a follow-up question with this. Should we be praying to Krishna, the absolute truth, or Radha, the divine dispenser of mercy? And she adds, thank you for this beautiful book and your time.
Oh, thank you. Well, why don't we pray to both of them? Why does it have to be one or the other? Radha is described, this is really beautiful. Radha is described as the personification of Krishna's love. God's love becomes personified in the goddess. So how much love does the Supreme Person have? And personified in Sri Radha, how much love does she have? It's described that her love is so powerful that she just looks at the side of her eye, she glances at Krishna, and the flute drops from his hand. He starts reeling and almost loses consciousness. That's the power of her love. So when we're talking about these divine persons and divine love, we're entering a realm with which we have very few points of reference that we can really understand. We can hear these things and we can kind of get a feeling for them, but it's really beyond the scope of our current experience, where love is regularly betrayed, not fully expressed. It is often confined to externals, where we really forget how to see the spiritual being in the heart of the person that we are right next to. So we're conditioned to these paltry experiences of love, but where we want to go as spiritual beings is to the most exalted state of love. And when we start talking about that, we can only kind of get a glimpse of it and keep praying that we get more glimpses. And so I say we pray to both these lovers, these supreme lovers who have given us, they are infinite consciousness, right? The supreme male and masculine and feminine. We are finite consciousness. We have the exact same qualities they have, but just to a minute degree. So as they are supreme lovers, we're lovers and we're attracted to that love. And Krishna says in the Gita that in order to attain that love, we need mercy and we need the divine intervention. So yeah, we should pray for it a lot, like regularly, like every day. Give me hope. Help me, please. I'm small and I will never, ever be released from the laws of justice without mercy. It's hopeless for me.
So in speaking about Malati, first of all, does that answer your question?
Well, it was beautiful. It brought tears to my eyes. Thank you.
Oh, that's good. I mean, that's where I want to go all the time, is tears in my eyes. When I start really understanding the value of what we're being shown here, it's really overwhelming, and it's not an easy journey for sure, but it's a beautiful one. And when we can cry tears, we're getting closer.
So this comes back really directly to what I was going to ask you about, because one of the really big takeaways for me in terms of how I practice bhakti is the idea that the mind can't change the heart, but the heart can change the mind. So when our practice comes from the heart, sometimes we think about meditation, I must control my mind, and it becomes very difficult and laborious. But you're proposing a kind of sailing west to get to the east approach, that we start with the heart rather than the mind. So can you talk just a little bit more about that?
Yeah, what is
Liza?
Yeah, what is our experience? Our experience is that our thoughts go to what our interests are, where we place our heart. And so if my heart is placed in basketball, I'm going to want to watch basketball all the time. I'm going to be thinking about it. I'm going to be talking about it. That's where I'm going to go. And so unfortunately for us, our heart doesn't automatically go to the Supreme Person, our source, the Supreme Lover. It's not automatic. So we have to cultivate that heart. And we cultivate that heart by hearing about the Supreme Person. And this is another really, really beautiful aspect about Bhakti Vedanta and the Bhakti path, is that there's so much rich narrative that gives us insight into the personality, the psychology, the activities, the form of the absolute, of absolute reality, supreme consciousness. We do not find the extent of information, specific information we have about the Supreme Person within the tradition of Bhakti. We don't find that anywhere else. And therefore, most of us, or, I find anyway, in speaking with people, we have this amorphous, very vague idea about the Supreme. It's a higher power. It's power, it's bigger than me, but there's no face or name to it. And even within religious traditions, it remains vague. The names that we have for the Supreme Person are a lot of power names and vague, they're vague. But within the Bhakti tradition, we have really specific names. The son of Yashoda, this amazing person who loves the Supreme so much that she can capture him with a rope, tie him up and say, don't do that again. And he completely submits in love. And he enjoys that. And he says, the statements of Sri Radha correcting me enchant me more than any Vedic mantra can ever do. Because what's happening, it's a love exchange. There's love being exchanged. And everyone surrounding the Supreme Person are supreme lovers. He's a supreme lover. And by hearing about this, we culture our heart. And when we do, then gradually we take more and more interest in getting to know this incredible person, this perfect person. And when we do, our mantra meditation just follows automatically. We want to hear about this person. We like this person. This is really a nice person to get to know.
This is such a nice reason for us to get together and do this again, because this idea of personal relationship as a natural conclusion of Vedic philosophy and Vedanta in particular is something that I think can provide a nice jumping off point for future conversation. And it was one of the things also that really, really impressed me about your book, that, you know, this is something coming from the heart, but it is not something that is in any way sentimental, that this is intellectual stuff,
Yeah.
as well as emotional stuff, that the two go hand in hand.
Yeah, you don't achieve divine love. That's the premise of the first book, Wise Love. It's not a sentimental love, it's a wise love. It's grounded in deep philosophy. And it's only through the metaphysics of understanding reality that we can actually transcend to get to that state of divine love. So yeah, they go hand in hand. But we want to we want our heart to soften, and that will drive our practice and the perfection of it.
All right. I want to make sure everyone knows where to get your book, how to connect with you, how to learn more. I'm going to go ahead and put some URLs in the chat, but if you could just speak about, you know, how people can connect with you, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay, so there's Pranada's, and we have a fairly long message. Oh, from Delphina. Hi, Delphina. It's nice to see you. Thank you for being here. So I'm going to come back to your comment in a second. But Pranada's homepage is now in the chat. And of course, I'll make that available for all you folks in replay land. Delphina, that's okay. And here is the link where you can purchase Bhakti Shakti. So if you want to get
And Hari, we can let them know that on my homepage, they can download a free book called The Inner Loving Self.
Oh yes, that's right. So bonus, you get a free thing.
And also a bonus, if I'm sure some of you know, but Bhakti Shakti has an official song. I was told at the time that I wanted to do this song that no book has an official song. And I said, well, I guess I'm going to start.
That's a first, yes.
Bhakti Shakti has official song and you can stream it. And now it's finally on the different platforms where you can download it for 99 cents and support the artists. And that is also available on my website.
Right, very good. Also, some of you are here who haven't really met me before. So if speaking of free things, if you'd like a free resource to help in the process of how to read, enter into, and understand traditional yoga wisdom texts, you can visit me on my website as well. And let me just take a quick look at, oh, we do have it. Do you have a little bit of time for a couple of extra questions?
Sure.
Okay, so let me go back to Delphina's question first. She is a Bhakti Yoga practitioner for some time, also taken up a little bit of Peruvian shamanism. The Divine Mother is said to be working through specific plants, as is the Father. So I'm wondering if technically it would be considered that Durga is personally associated with these plants and the earth.
My short answer would be yes, because you're dealing with the herbs from the earth, and it is in the material. These are things given to us for us to use in the material world, and yeah, as far as I understand, they are within her realm.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. And then Dana asks, what about the notion of chanting as a means to better deepen the personal relationship with the Supreme Being?
I got sidetracked with something that came up. Say that again.
Okay. What about the notion of chanting as a means to deepen one's personal relationship to the Supreme Being?
Yeah, that is exactly the, that's exactly why we chant. It is the primary process where we are in dialogue, direct dialogue with the Supreme. It is not only in establishing that relationship that we're in, we are petitioning and we're calling out for assistance and for connection. But in cultivating that relationship, that's how we're getting messages back, because it is a direct connection. And I found that the more that I am focused on my sadhana and my practices, the more I am experiencing the personal presence of Sri Radha and Krishna in my life in a very, very tangible way.
Dina, you have your hand up, so and I'm hoping I've pronounced your name properly. But if you would like to add to this, please go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to clarify. Thank you for the response to that. And yes, that's how you pronounce my name, Hari. Thank you. Because you were just talking about a few minutes ago about, you know, our thoughts go to where our heart is. So we want to learn about, as we cultivate, we want to hear about the divine. We want to learn and hear about the divine. So, you know, I use chanting as a means to make that connection, is my question. But I wanted to sort of juxtapose that next to the hearing and learning about the divine versus chanting as a means to learn about the divine. I want to clarify that.
Yeah, I mean, these are there are 9 practices of the Bhakti Yoga system, and they're shown as separate: hearing, chanting, remembering, praying, doing the work of the Lord within the world. So yeah, they are separate, but they're also very much connected, because what is happening in chanting is we're hearing, right? And what are we in, when we're engaged in that and we're engaged in the relationship, what's happening? We're learning. So they're connected, and they're connected in a very direct, they're connected in a direct way. And then chanting doesn't mean just taking the mantra, but in speaking about the Supreme. It can be writing is also considered an anga of a limb of the chanting. So it's speaking, it's lecturing, it's writing, it's communicating, and then hearing the chanting, reading the texts, putting those deposits in our consciousness that are directly discussing the nature of the Supreme Person, is learning, deepening our relationship with the chanting. It's all working together. Is that okay, Dana?
Right. All right. I just want to remind everyone that we will be posting a link to the recording. So if you want to see the replay, if you didn't catch all of our conversation, want to listen to what you missed, that will be available. We'll send that out via email, and also I'll post it in my Instagram post as a comment on this. So if you're looking for the replay, that's where it'll be. Pranada, thank you so much. This was so much fun and so informative and so inspiring. Thank you very much for coming and spending some time with all of us here. This was really great.
Thank you. I really appreciated the opportunity to be with everyone.
And if you do not yet have, oh, Tiffany, thank you very much for being here. I'm glad you were here. If you do not yet have Pranada's book, Bhakti Shakti, then now you know all the good reasons why you should pick it up. I highly recommend it. It really is the best book about Bhakti Yoga that I've ever read, and I really can't recommend it enough. So once again, thank you all very much for being here. And Pranada, thank you very much for writing such a wonderful book and spending the time speaking with us about it.
Thank you.
All right, I hope you all have, oh, Chris, thank you very much for being here. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your weekend and rest of your life. This is the part where we just smile at the camera.
Was this the part that we do that? Okay.
Yeah, we just smile at the camera. They said that's the hard part about being on TV. You know, you just.
Hare Krishna. Nobody
Just
wants
so
to leave.
Well, everybody, yes. Well, goodbye, everyone. See ya.
Hare Krishna.
Is this because you have to have everyone get off before you leave?
I don't have to do that, but I thought this is also, by the way, a good way to see who was actually paying attention, and or who wants to get the backstage pass to hang out with the band, or who just put it on and then went about their business and forgot that they were on. That's also it. So. Okay, so there are still a few people here. Let's speak after the fact.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Thank you, Hari.
Thank you all very much.